Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Crimson Crossover podcast presented by the Field of 68 and J&J Apparel. I'm your host, Christian Sykes, joined as always by Charles Branch and Joey Blackwell. How you guys doing today?
Finally thawed out after a very cold week. Alabama was cold in some spots, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But glad to be back after a week off and looking forward to, it's starting to get to crunch time. I think we have 10 quad one opponents in a row starting this Wednesday. So it's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, it's always nice to go 2-0, but lackluster performance, I would say. At least for two and a half of the four halves of basketball. So, we'll turn the page on that a little bit and focus on how to teach these Bulldogs to behave this week with Mississippi State and Georgia. But still, I think there's still questions about this team, and I think the questions about this team are just deserved as far as just not really seeing the evidence that we'd like to see of a dominant team, of a team that's number four in the country. Now this team is winning, and at the end of the day, you need wins. But I think there's just we'd like to have more confidence with more evidence of dominance performances than just getting wins in the win columns against teams that should probably run up the score a little bit more.
Yeah, we were kind of talking beforehand about the maturity of this team. And I think that really came into question Saturday. Um, for those of you who live under a rock and aren't familiar with what happened potentially. Mark Sears got benched in the second half, um, and that has created a firestorm of tweets and Facebook posts and comments from people, all of these different things. And so we're going to lead off with that, just kind of give our thoughts and address some of the, I guess, topics that have come up or come out of Mark Sears being benched. So I'll get started. The three things we're kind of going to talk about is one, the benching. So um, Mark Sears was 0 of 5, 0 of 2 from the field. He had 3 rebounds, 3 assists, but didn't really look like the Mark Sears that we've been seeing the past couple of weeks and throughout the season in the first half. And I presume that Nate Oates at halftime decided that him and Cliff Amori were going to be benched just based off of their effort and play. And clearly, Cliff responded well and was able to play in the second half, and I think had a pretty decent game. It finished with like 8 rebounds, 8 points, 3 assists, and a block, I believe. And I think he was pretty effective. But Mark Sears coming out of halftime was sitting on the end of the bench, was not very involved, very engaged with the team, and I presume that Nate probably told them, you know, hey, you're done for the night or something of that sorts. Which ultimately throughout the game on TV, you could see them panning over to Mark. He was upset. He was having conversations. I think a video on next round came out of him having a conversation with Preston Murphy on the bench for about like 2 or 3 minutes. So um, some people have said, "Hey, you can't bench your best player." I say to that, why not? You know that Nate isn't going to go out there and say, "Hey, you're our best player. You can't be benched. You're not responsible for the bad your poor play and your poor attitude." That sends a bad message to the team currently and to any future team that we have. Another thing that came out of it was Mark's mom made a bunch of Facebook posts and then had to put like an apology post together. Look, here's the thing about all of that. We're talking about Mark's mom, right? Charles, you're a father. If your kid was being shown as crying on national television, and then after the television or after the game, there's a whole segment on Sports Center about how he got benched and his attitude and all of this, and then the press conference player reporters are asking questions about it. Do you think that you would be, and maybe you don't go on Facebook and make a post about it, but do you think you would be defensive of your kid regardless of the profile of your kid?
Yeah, 100%. And so, yeah.
Like that's just what a parent does, right? Now, should she have been on Facebook and posted about it? Probably not. Like, but like she's a parent. She's a reactionary mom and much more a mom to a son than a father to a son. Like that's like the mom instinct. And the fact she had to make a post about it and there was news coverage about it, I just think is just dumb. It's not like Mark came out and said those things. Um, and then the last thing, there were some people trying to relate this scenario to Jalen Miro trying to get benched. Look, basketball is a five-man sport where one person on a team can get hot, but you need all five players to play together. It's not a good, Mark Sears isn't the quarterback of the basketball team, right? Like he's the best player on the team, but he's not, there's not a quarterback position in basketball. And I just think that people are trying to link things that don't need to be linked. They're trying to get mad because of results that we didn't play as well as we wanted to. Look, this isn't the first time this season Mark's not played in the second half of a game. And he came back and he played well the next game. Like that's a challenge to from Nate Oates to Mark. And the expectation is that the All-American guard, fifth year senior, that is one of your highest paid NIL players is going to respond. And I have every bit of faith that he will. So that's just kind of the overview and kind of my thoughts on it. What about you guys?
Joey,
I'll let
wants
you go first. I'll take it, I guess. Before we get to Mark, I will say you were talking about how both Mark and Cliff were sat out, to start that second half. I did really like how Cliff responded to that. He finished the game, like you said, Christian. I think he had 9 rebounds. I'm looking at the stats now, but he got 7 of those in the second half. So he really, and I think he had 8 points, and he got 4 in the second half as well. So really strong, um, um, bounce back in the second half for him. With Mark, like y'all both said, benched for the second half. It's something that's completely. Sorry, I know there's a lot of. If you're listening to this, you're not seeing me sit here and think. You're just hearing a lot of silences. But the reason is because I'm trying to think of how to word this. I think all of this has been very reactionary. I think it's been an overreaction. Um, this is something that Oates routinely does. You bench players that maybe aren't living up to the same expectations of what you have for them. Sears obviously has a lot on his shoulders, and that pressure doesn't just come from Nate Oates. It comes from you, Christian. It comes from you, Charles. It comes from me. It comes from every single person. We have high expectations for him because we know what a great athlete he is and what a good player he is. But it's more than just being able to shoot a 3 from the center court logo. It's also, it's also effort. That's a huge part of the blue collar mentality that Oates tries to instill in his players. And if you're affected on the court to where, he was 0 for 5 from the floor the first half, you also start to see his effort go down. We also don't know what happened in the locker room at halftime. I'm sure we've all heard some stuff that happened, but we weren't there. So for somebody to come out and say that, Sears shouldn't have been benched, I think that's ridiculous. I think that if you're a head coach, I think that sends a really strong message. Whether it's good or bad, that's up to how the players interpret it and what their maturity level is. But it sends a really strong message that it doesn't matter what name is on the back of your jersey. We have a certain, set of standards here. And if you're not playing to those standards, then you can sit on the bench. So I fully expect to see Mark come back. I was talking before we were recording here about, I think Mark is a really mature guy. I think he does take this, and I think he will use it as motivation. I think we will see him have a really solid, game this Wednesday. I know a lot of people were concerned, but the reason I think he's a mature guy is just because of what he's proven over the course of his time at Alabama. That's not just me. My hypothesis, my theory is also based in facts that we've seen from him over and over again. I think he's a very mature guy, but even the most mature people have slip ups from time to time and let emotion come through. Just because Mark had one bad night where he was upset on the bench doesn't mean that that's going to define his entire career. It was one night, and we should all stop talking about how, him crying on the bench, that shouldn't be his legacy. I know it won't be, but we should stop talking as if it's going to tarnish anything. that's really all I have to say about that.
I think at when this season is over, Mark Sears will go down at worst a top three Alabama basketball player as far as play on the floor, where his teams have gotten to as far as number one overall seed in the NCAA tournament, a regular season championship, a regular a conference tournament championship, leading Alabama to its first double Final Four. There's obviously a lot ahead of us right now. He scored over 2,500 points in his career. One of the guys that really congratulated him on that was Nate Oates in his press conference after the Vanderbilt game. Mark Sears has put a lot of time, effort, blood, sweat, tears into this program, and I do believe he's going to be remembered for that when this season ends. Another guy who's put a lot of blood, sweat, tears into this program is Nate Oates. He's taken it from basically nothing to now a perennial power, not only in the SEC, but across the country. Nate Oates has earned the right to make whatever decisions he wants to as it relates to his basketball team. Mark Sears' eligibility at Alabama will end after this year. Nate Oates will still be the head coach at Alabama after this year. We at least hope so. We hope he doesn't go to the NBA or anything like that. It
I
isn't
don't know if
all
I don't know if I can take another live reveal on our podcast again. I think I was a one and done for that.
this team is built to compete for a national championship, but Alabama basketball will not end after this year. There are additional national championships to go after this season. Coach Oates has got a team where you do have some seniors that their eligibility will run out, but there's also many players on this team that he's going to count on next year. When he got to Alabama, there was a lot of talk about changing the culture. The culture, I think it's a continuous thing that has to change or you have to maintain. So the decision that I feel like he made coming out of halftime to put Cliff and to put Mark on the bench was a decision about not only playing better and trying to wake up this team as far as second halves and playing better on defense, but also relates to the culture that he has built as far as playing to a standard. As we mentioned, Mark was not the only guy who started on the bench to start the second half. Cliff also started on the bench in the second half, grabbed 7 more rebounds in the second half. I think he played 14 minutes in the second half. He took the challenge the appropriate way and responded well. I understand, Mark's mom posting on Facebook because of what happened is very public. And so you feel like you have to make a public statement and you want to protect your son. You know, that's obviously what's going to happen when you have grown Alabama into a national spotlight and you yourself are a national player that's, was projected not only as an All-American, but player of the year. I also have the confidence that Mark will respond really well from this. I think he'll play really well in Starkville. And if it's still not all together, I don't have concerns about Mark in the future. We've seen what he can do that I expect him to continue to lead this team as far as we're able to go. But there is something as far as it relates to this team as just finding some type of business or maturity type level that in these games where you are vastly superior than the other team, needing to approach those games the right way and playing to a certain standard. If you look at this past 4 game stretch that we've had, when we went to Kentucky, we played great, but we knew that was going to be a challenge. Kentucky's a top 10 team. You know, Ole Miss is a team that has obviously lost a couple of games now, but we seen the talent level there. That's still a game that we probably should have won, and obviously didn't play well. And then you get into this week against Vanderbilt and LSU, which is probably the easiest part of your schedule. You did play great in the first half against Vanderbilt, but then they beat you in the second half basically, and you give up 56 points. And then you play LSU to a 40-40 tie in the first half and end up winning the game by 7. So you would like to just see this team. It's not all about running up the score. I get that. It's not all about, margin of victory, but there is a certain standard that I don't feel like this team has really achieved as it goes to how they play the game. It's also hard at times, I feel like, to criticize this team when a lot of our expectations may have been 10-3, 9-4 in the non-conference, and they finished 11-2. A lot of our expectations for this first half of the SEC conference might have been 7-2, 6-3. And if they split this week, they're going to finish 7-2. So they're not going to fall short as it relates to record, expectations. I do think there's a lot to be desired on the defensive side, and I do know that that's something that they're working on. And I think on the offense, we've obviously become accustomed to seeing NATO's teams make a lot of threes. That hasn't really been the case this year, but I do think they're understanding that and attacking in different ways that, of course, still makes this team very efficient on the offensive side, still allows them to put up a lot of points on the board and run away from games. So hopefully this is just a small footnote in what this season will be. And the team really rallied around Mark, I thought, watching the game. You had a lot of guys, a lot of players come up, put their arm around him, talk to him, encourage him. And to his credit, he continued to be in the huddles. He continued to cheer on guys. When guys would come out, he continued, as guys are going down, high-fiving and stuff like that. He played his role in that too. So I do expect not only him, I expect the team to respond to this challenge, which, if you're going to have a challenge, now's the time to do it because we know what the schedule is on the back half, and we need to continue to take care of games and get some wins in the win column before we finish with 7 top 25 teams currently to finish the SEC regular season.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I failed to mention is Cliff got benched and won the hard hat, right? And
Yeah.
no one's talking about how Oates benched Cliff and Cliff came out and showed the effort that Oates wanted, right? Like that's not the conversation. Like Cliff won the hard hat while playing poorly in the first half, being challenged by Nate Oates, and then came out and played to the standard that Nate wants them to play. And if you watch the hard hat video, the very first person to jump up and cheer and congratulate Nick and like do the whole like head tapping thing was Mark Sears. So it's not like could there be animosity? Sure. I don't think that that's the case between Nate Oates and Mark Sears and the Sears family and Nate. It's just a coach coaching a very good player to the standard that he knows that the player can be at. And it's up to that player to respond to it. And that's all it is. Whatever anyone else says, whatever Mark's mom says, that's not Mark Sears. That doesn't have an effect on the basketball team, right? It doesn't have an effect as a fan, you watching the game, what a parent says about a coach, about a player. I mean, heck, I can give you countless stories of players' parents saying things about coaching staffs, saying things about other players, all of these things. And guess what? Some of those things that happened, those teams accomplished really big things despite what the coaches despite what the players' parents were saying, right? I just think the whole thing just got blown out of proportion. I don't think that Sears' mom needs to apologize for being upset that her son was, I said it on Twitter, aired out on national TV. That's what it was. And people will, oh, you don't need to. Okay, sure. Yeah. She probably shouldn't have put it on Facebook. Great. Who cares? Who cares? So, anyway, that's all we're going to say on that. Going to the LSU game, I think the Mark Sears thing is a bigger or a small part of a larger issue with the Alabama team, which is lack of focus, lack of maturity on the court, and lack of intentionality with how they're playing the game when it comes to these lesser teams. LSU is a very athletic, very very in your face type of team where Alabama just did not respect them enough and it showed. And we've talked about this ad nauseum going into this SEC play where you can't let wins, you can't let losses affect your next game performance. And I think what ended up happening is Alabama came out well versus Vanderbilt and said, "Ah, we got this. We're good." And then in first Vanderbilt in the second half, their effort lacked. And then in LSU, oh, LSU sucks. They're worse than Vanderbilt. We just beat Vanderbilt by however much it was. We can sleepwalk through this game. And guess what? You almost got beat. So now you have a very difficult a team that you're going to in the hump versus Mississippi State, a very physical, very um, in your face team similar to LSU that is looking to make a big statement win at their place. And you just came off a lackluster performance versus LSU. So it's how you're going to respond. So for Alabama versus in this LSU game, I was very disappointed. It's just not. I don't care if they make threes. I don't care if they make shots. I want to see intentionality and effort every single play, and we are not seeing it on a game to game basis, and that's what's frustrating the most with me. It's 20 games into the season. It's the same issues that we saw in game one, two, and three, right?
And not to make excuses, LSU did not have a midweek game. They played like a team that had gotten a few extra days of rest. They were very scrappy. They attacked the boards very aggressively, of course, and getting all the offensive rebounds. So, and we will not play a team the rest of the way in conference play coming off of a bye in midweek. So we've kind of gotten past that. We've obviously got our midweek off game coming up next week, actually, but you could tell there was an additional spring in their step and that LSU kind of figured out some things maybe offensively. They got Jordan Sears going. He was a transfer for them in the offseason. He hadn't probably really lived up to what they were expecting from him, but he went for 21 points off the bench and played really, really well. And a guy who sometimes comes off the bench, but actually started for us against LSU, Chris Youngblood. He was great starting the game. I think that is a position as far as starting that's probably more comfortable for him. I don't know if it's something going forward that he started over LeBaron because I think Coach Oates said on the before the game that LeBaron had gotten a little bit banged up in practice. So I don't know if a healthy LeBaron gets added to the lineup and maybe you see somebody else like a Jaron Stevenson come off the bench. I still contend that Jaron Stevenson is better coming off the bench, but I'm sitting here in my office in Birmingham, not sitting in the coach's chair in Tuscaloosa. But getting Chris Youngblood in the starting lineup, I do think was a benefit for this team and for Chris, and we'll be interested to see if that is continued, in these next couple games, and we actually get into a better rhythm in starting games with somebody like him inserted into the lineup.
And Mo D also had a really good game too. Want to mention him real quick. And he finished the night with 14 points, 6 rebounds. I'm fairly confident that if Cliff hadn't won the hard hat for his second half performance, it probably would have been Mo D again. The dude just oozes effort and blue collar, and so wanted to give him a little quick shout out too. Mo D has really come about these past. I mean, he's once again kind of like Youngblood and everybody else. He's becoming the player that we all knew that he could be, and we're really have been seeing that for the past month or so. Just now that he's heated up offensively, he's added that to his defense, and I think his uptick in offense has improved his confidence on the defensive end of the floor as well. And so we're really seeing him hit his stride. I think Sears gets all the headlines for obvious reason. Cliff gets a lot of headlines for what he was, for what he was going to bring, with him to this team. But I think at the end of the day, Mo D is really the secret weapon on this team. He's the guy that's going to come out of nowhere and just rock your world. And so just wanted to give him a quick shout out in his effort. While the team in general has had its issues, Mo D is still peak Mo D right now.
Yeah, it was definitely yet another Modi game. And if there's one additional stat that I could highlight, LeBaron Philon going 6 of 6 from the free throw line. He's typically been around a 67, 70% free throw shooter. He's a guy that should continue to get to the free throw line with how he plays, attacking the rim and being able to hang and take contact. So him going 6 of 6, I believe is huge for him and his confidence. And hopefully that's something he can continue to do, not only attacking the rim, but knocking down these free throws when he does get to the line.
So, talking about going into the game on Wednesday night, which Charles, if you didn't know, the game's on Wednesday night. Um, what do you got for us as far as a preview is concerned?
Just it, I've said it several times on the spaces. It's different looking at Mississippi State and just not having that dominant big as far as leading them in points or second in points and averaging, 10 plus rebounds or something like that. They still got a decent big in Keyshawn Murphy, who's actually from Birmingham, played at Ramsey High School. He's averaging 10 points and 7 rebounds, but just doesn't really strike. I don't feel like he strikes the fear in you like a Tolu Smith did. And I also feel like we as a team are probably a little bit better to defend the paint than what we have been in years past. But Mississippi State's obviously still got Josh Hubbard. He's averaging 16 points a game. He's shooting less than 40% from the field and about 35% from three. They got Claudell Harris, who's a transfer from Boston College, Riley Kugel, who's a transfer from Florida, RJ Melendez, a transfer from Georgia, Cam Matthews is still there. They've got several guys that average in double figures, and a lot of those guys actually do start for them. So what I feel like I've noticed in games that they've lost is their starters have done what they typically do as far as scoring the basketball, several guys getting double digits. But limiting their bench and not having somebody, go off from the bench or anything like that and getting a lot of bench points is where they've typically struggled against Tennessee and Kentucky and Auburn in those SEC losses. It may actually be a benefit for us that this game is on Wednesday night at 8, because I do consider Humphrey Coliseum as a tough place to play. And obviously, with how Chris Jans coaches defense, they're going to be scrappy. They're going to get into you. It's going to be important for us to take care of the basketball. It's going to be important for us to defend and know our assignments and know, don't go under a screen, but go over a screen, even though they're still not a great 3-point shooting team, that you just don't give guys wide open looks and let them, get on the run or get the hump hyped and get it going. Um, this look, Mississippi State is a very good team. Chris James has done a phenomenal job there. It's a game that if you drop this game, you're still fine. You turn around and beat Georgia on Saturday. This is a game, I think, similar to Texas A&M. You get this win, and it's like you're playing with a little bit more house money potentially. So I'm very excited to see, of course, how we respond from this past week. It's been talked about how this team likes to play on the road. This will be a really good test as far as defensively too for a lot of our guards and right out of the gate, talking about Sears and defense, he's going to have to guard one of these guys, and that's not just him. LeBaron and Aiden and all those guys are going to have to guard too. So can our trio of guards or just our guys manage their guards? I like our matchups. I like our chances, but still, I think it's going to be a tough place to play on Wednesday night.
Yeah, I think Mississippi State's a really really solid team, but one of my concerns with them and how they match up with Alabama is their length. I think Bama really has an advantage there. That being said, the hump is a very, very tough place to play, particularly this year. But Hubbard is obviously having a fantastic season. I think he's averaging just over 16 points a game and just a couple of rebounds a game. But really, their key shot, I think a lot of this game is going to center around Keyshawn Murphy, who's I think he might be he's one of, if not the tallest player in the lineup. I think they have a couple of 6'11s on there too, but they don't really get a lot of action. But Keyshawn Murphy's averaging over 10 points a game. He's averaging over 7 rebounds a game. I think how much of a distraction and how much of our defense has to be focused on him is going to be a pivotal part in the game. If Mississippi State wins the game, I think he is going to play a crucial part in that. So be on the lookout for him, not just Hubbard. But this is a really talented, Mississippi State team. I was actually talking to somebody at my office earlier today about this week's games, and they're like, "Oh, well, Mississippi State, they're only 4-3 in conference play right now. They can't be that good, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, they're 4-3, but they're also still 16-4 overall at 4-3. That's more of a depiction of the SEC rather than a depictor of Mississippi State, I think. So this is still a really solid team. Georgia as well. They have not started conference play like they wanted to, 2-5, but they're also 14-6 overall. So overall, I think this is a really good opportunity to get a couple of wins under our belts this week. And right now 6-1 in conference play. I think there's a strong potential to start 8-1, which would be huge if we can go with that record through our first 9 games. That being said, it's not going to be easy, but I think our guys, I think they have the maturity to be able to bounce back after this past weekend. That being said, a game, against Georgia, if they're get a win on the road on Wednesday, that's going to be tough too, because like we talked earlier, seeing these guys after a big win or a solid road win, they don't exactly come out fighting the first half in games following. So I think this could be the week where they turn that around and we could finally see some maturity on this team when it comes to starting basketball games.
Yeah, and I think what's big for Alabama, the regardless of result, right, on Wednesday, is you have to take this as all right, you finished your first half of your SEC play with X record, whatever record. I assume that they wanted to be undefeated. I assume that that's what, but like they had an expectation of like, hey, we want to be here by our bye. And fortunately enough for Alabama, their bye comes at like the midpoint of the SEC compared to I think like Auburn had theirs 2 weeks ago. LSU had theirs obviously last week. I think that it's perfect for Alabama as a not necessarily a reset point, but like a reevaluation point going into that bye week. Like finish this off strong. Maybe you go 8-1. Maybe you go 7-2, right? Whatever the uh, God, please don't go 6-3. That's all I'm begging for is not going 6-3. Um, but maybe you go 7-2, right? And then now you have a week to kind of reset and readjust. We're on the back half of the schedule, which I think like the Titus show took a screenshot of like the, Alabama's like February schedule. Every single team you play in February, as of right now, is ranked. Well, after you get through Arkansas
Arkansas
and
and Texas.
Texas. After those 2 games, every single team you play is ranked.
And those Arkansas and Texas games are on the road.
Yeah.
So they won't be easy.
And with talented players.
Yeah.
Like they're not bad teams. Talented players. Texas just beat Texas A&M on the road.
Yeah. Talking about Mississippi State being 4-3. Yeah, those 3 losses are to Kentucky, Auburn, and Tennessee, all top 10. So it's not really something to, hang your head about as far as those losses. And then talking about Georgia a little bit, I just noticed too, they will play, I'm assuming this is coming out tomorrow on Tuesday. They playing at home against South Carolina at 6 o'clock on Tuesday night. So they get a full extra day of rest and get the early game where we've got the late game on Wednesday. Now we do have a 80-mile return trip to Tuscaloosa, so and shouldn't be too bad. But we just look at little things like that, especially with what I expect our game to be at Mississippi State. Still to be pretty physical, be pretty scrappy, just how Mississippi State's been and how Chris Jans has built that program. But I know Alabama fans should be pretty familiar with Asa Newell. He was a guy that we went after pretty hard, but went to Georgia. He's averaging about 15 points a game for them right now, and they've got some additional players like Silas Demery and Blue Crane and Tyron Lawrence. that continue to give them good minutes. And I think, Joey, you were right. They haven't really, started conference play like they wanted to, being 2-5. They did get off to a good start where they were 2-1, but then they ran into playing Tennessee and Auburn and Florida and all that. So it'll be an important. I mean, that's another one you got to show up. You got to be ready. They've lost. Georgia's lost the number in front of their name, but it's still a very good team that is projected right now to be in the NCAA tournament. You've got a coach in Mike White who's been around the SEC for a really long time. It's just be focused, understand your assignments, play with the max effort, one of the cornerstones and pillars of this program. Let's see that max effort from everybody for a full 40 minutes, not just 10, 20, 30 minutes, but a full 40 minutes, and get a big win at home. That's something that we haven't really had a whole lot of this year. We've had a lot of wins at home, but something that really gets the fans excited and, delivering kind of a knockout punch early on. Maybe Oklahoma, but that's really been about it this year.
Well, and that Oklahoma game was a weird game where like Alabama just kind of gradually built the lead. It wasn't like a pop, you know what I'm saying? Where it's like you come out, pop them in the mouth. It was just like Oklahoma miss a shot, Alabama make a shot. Oklahoma make a shot, Alabama make a three. Then all of a sudden, Alabama's up 4 points, and then that's just kept on happening over the course of the game to where eventually Alabama grew like a 20-point lead. And but like it does feel like Coleman has yet to have a game where the crowd's just like going nuts. You talk about the Ole Miss game, like watching that on TV, the crowd wanted to just go on a run. Like you could feel it from even watching it on TV, you could feel the crowd just wanted the Alabama to go on a run. Just to and it just hasn't happened this season. It really hasn't. Um,
Yeah. They were trying to will the team to a win that game. It just didn't really work out.
yeah. Um,
I got a question for you guys. With all these new crimson jerseys that we've been pulling together this year, is our basketball team about to be like LSU in football, where we just have, we wear crimson no matter if we're playing home or away the rest
Please
of the
no.
way?
Please no.
No.
Every Crimson
I
game at home, we always play poorly. Why are we?
not only that, but it looked like a hot dog stand out there on the court with solid solid crimson jerseys and solid yellow. I've never been a fan of two darks, playing at the same time. I like it being, a lighter jersey and a darker jersey, but I don't know. LSU, I say that, but ironically, LSU is one of those teams where they wear white on the road and at home a lot. But still,
I mean, playing LSU, should it be a hot dog stand or a corn dog stand?
It's a corn dog
we
stand
play when we
in
play
Baton
at
Rouge.
Baton Rouge. At Baton Rouge, it'll be a corn dog
Yeah.
stand.
Gotcha.
It'll be a what is it? A Nate dog? Is that what they call it, or whatever Oates' hot dog is? I don't remember. I feel like they've changed the name for that thing like 3 times.
I'm just upset we didn't get Avery dogs back in the day. Um, but no, I mean, I think this week's important. I think this week is a very big tone setting week for how you want to set up the rest of the season. Um, and you come out of this, like Charles said, going on the road, back-to-back games to Arkansas, to Tennessee. That's how you come out of your bye week, and or non-midweek game. I don't really necessarily call it a bye week, but um, yeah, I'm excited for Wednesday's game. I think it's going to be a dogfight. I wouldn't be surprised if that game is played in the 60s or 70s, if I'm being honest, as far as like just the type of physicality that's going to be shown. I think this is going to be a really good test for Alabama when they go and play Tennessee. If they can play this Mississippi State team well at home. I expect a lot of gumps in the hump in Starkville this week. And then hopefully we get a good result, and the crowd on Saturday is good, really good. And I don't think Georgia's been very good, particularly on the road. But that's not to make light of Georgia, and that's not to take them seriously, because as we saw, LSU, who's now 1-5 in the league, put us in a dogfight. So
So I have to ask. You mentioned Wednesday will be a dog fight. You mentioned Saturday will be a dog fight. Are those puns intended or not intended?
You sure intended. We'll teach the Bulldogs to behave all week.
That's right. I do think if you split this week, and you come out of your break and you win at Arkansas and then you win at Texas, you're obviously coming into the home game against Auburn, and that will start a really brutal stretch. But I really do believe with this team that if you can basically go 3-1 out of these next four games, you're almost going to lock yourself in to a double bye in the SEC tournament. And I think that's really, it's not only really important for, trying to compete for an SEC tournament championship, but as you get ready for the NCAA tournament, just to have one additional game not on your legs, no matter how far you go in the SEC tournament, I think would be really, really important. So find a way to go 3-1. And if you go 2-2, you still obviously have a lot of basketball ahead of you. Teams are still going to beat up on each other, and so you're still probably well positioned to be in a top four position. You may need some tiebreakers to go your way, but I really think 3-1 could almost lock you into that spot potentially.
Well, and as we're talking, Nate Oates is on Hey Coach and said Mark Sears, I mean, take this with a grain of salt. Had an unbelievable practice today. Again, take anything that Nate Oates says in a press conference. I love you, Nate, but brother, you said Jashawn Holt was the next John Petty, so take that with a grain of salt. Um,
Oh,
um, but yeah, Joey, do you have anything else, Charles?
no, I think we've said all we can say about a lot of topics tonight, but looking forward to these two games this week.
I'll talk about the girls real quick. Tough loss Sunday at home against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's a really good team in the SEC this year, but it was an awesome return to the court for Sarah Ashley Barker. She scored 35 points. I actually looked at the ESPN bracketology for the women's, and Alabama's projected as a 4 seed, which means they would host the first and second round. They've got us in the Spokane regional. Would
Of
be
course.
really awesome to find a way to get into the Birmingham regional as well and just stay within the state for 4 games before they go to the Final Four. But I think they've got Kentucky this week, and I don't think it's Florida. We'll retweet it or something like that. But still doing awesome things. You know, putting a lot of good wins together, still really well positioned to make the NCAA tournament on the women's side. So if you get an opportunity to go out there and watch them, I highly recommend it. If you're in Tuscaloosa, if you're a student, go out and support them. They continue to do a great job representing the university.
Absolutely. And please don't put them in Spokane. Or do,
But
because all roads to the Final Four
That's
go
right.
through Spokane, Washington.
And one more thing, and I'll mention, and I hope I'm not stealing any of your thunder, Christian, as far as something you were going to mention. But I know the Weekly Joe Pod just released a preseason podcast, so give that a listen. The crew does a good job talking about Alabama baseball. Um, Basketball might be tougher this year than what baseball is, but we know what a gauntlet SEC baseball typically is, and then you're adding Texas and Oklahoma to that too. So give that a listen. I think they're something like 20 something days away from first pitch at the Joe. So wanted to make sure I mentioned that, being out there for people. If you're not subscribed to the Weekly Joe, get it subscribed again. So that you can get new podcasts as they preview weekends and also recap, the series that we just would have gone through.
Also, if you're a golf fan, I think we're supposed to record a golf episode sometime this week. So, Mulligans and Milkshakes.
Lee Hodge is playing awesome right now.
Yeah, yeah. Trey Mullinax sold me this week, but we'll have a conversation about that another time. Other than that, just we'll have our post game space on Wednesday. I don't have any more traveling until end of
Yeah.
February.
Kiowa, right?
Kiowa, yeah, yeah. So, um, all of the schedule should be fine up until that point, unless something emergency or something like that comes out. So, um, We'll have post game space Wednesday, have post game space Saturday. And then we're off next week as far as not the podcast, but midweek game, and we'll have a post game space on after Arkansas. So other than that, I think we're good to sign off. And we'll talk again soon. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Well, Todd.